Hello and welcome to Module 18, Understanding the Defense. So again, don't forget to have Microsoft Word open so that you can take notes. All right, so we're covering just two sections. We're going to discuss what is a defense in depth, and then we'll take a look at the need for security policies, understanding regulations and standards. So it should go pretty quick. All right, so the first thing that you need to understand is to be able to differentiate between, well, you need to understand what assets, vulnerability, and threats are. So please write those three bullet points down. So cybersecurity analysts must be able to identify what are the assets. Assets that is anything that the company buys so that they use those to make the money. Anything can be an asset. The chairs that they buy, the computers, the employees, everything. Take an inventory. You got to do that maybe once every 6 months or once a year. So you take an inventory of everything and where they are, the data, and including the data, of course, and where they are stored, the servers, and all of that. Okay, so not only physical assets, but it could be data, it could be human, it could be anything, right? And then you got to analyze the vulnerability on these assets. What are the weaknesses that a threat actor may use and exploit and break into and steal the data? And then you got to find out the threats, the potential danger to these assets. Are the doors to the offices are open and laptops are always thrown on the computer? So that could, on the desk, that could be a threat, a potential danger, right? So then when you first identify the threats, we just discussed that. So it's a collection of devices, information, and owned by the management. So again, so that's what assets are. Everything. You're taking an inventory of everything, including where the data is stored, like physical devices, appliances, employees, data, how everything is connected. Take an asset of everything, even if you can find and have a topology, the logical and the physical topology drawn out. That would help you identify where the assets are located, and if there is any intrusion to any of these devices, you'll be able to get there as quickly as possible, right? Identifying vulnerabilities. Okay, so please write these three bullets down. It's very important to be able to ask several questions, those three questions at least. What's the possible vulnerability on the system? Who may want to exploit these vulnerabilities? And what are the consequences? And it's important to identify those consequences. For example, if you have a garbage can in an office and it is very vulnerable, somebody may steal it. Who cares? We're not going to take any steps into protecting the garbage can or the chairs. But if you have a laptop, a $2,000 laptop sitting on a table and the doors are open and people are walking in the hallway, so that's a big vulnerability, and you need to address on what the consequence may be. It's going to cost you a lot of money and the data that is stored on that computer. Okay, so you have to be able to identify the vulnerability on those assets, where they are stored. Is there locked doors? Is there set of accounts on the computers that someone needs to get into? How the whole network is set up in terms of, is there firewalls, antivirus programs on the computer, and so on. All right, so again, the three things that you need to identify for e-banking. This is specifically for e-banking, and there's probably a good chance you may do an internship or a job in e-banking. So identifying threats in e-banking are the following, these 5 things. So write these down. Internal system compromise, people from inside trying to break into your system. Stolen customer data, of course, we don't want that, even if it's just their username and passwords and emails and things like that. Phony transaction, right? Somebody putting in a check that is not real. That happens a lot. So you may you know, one user may get an email um, asking them to deposit $10,000, which is a fake, a phony, fake check, and give me, and they'll ask them to, give me $100 for that, and we'll cash the check later on. I know a lot of people that did stupid things like that, and then they may, the problem is they may end up um, having to, if that check is phony, and somebody um, did a withdrawal, it might be an issue. But banks are usually very, very careful with that. Also, you can have, if somebody, what happens when somebody gets your debit card, ATM card, and they have your PIN? So you got to be very, very careful. Make sure the employees or the users know how to protect themselves. Data input errors. Okay, somebody put in the wrong data, or maybe instead of an employee puts in $10,000 instead of $1,000 as a check that had been saved in their bank account. I happened to be one time, instead of having 1,700 deposited in my bank account, they deposited 17,000. And I went home and I said, "Whoa, where did that come from?" So I immediately called them and they said, "Okay, we'll take care of it." If you keep that and later on they find out that is not true, and you used the money, that's stolen money. Even though it was an error on their end, you knew that money is not yours, right? Data center destruction. So if there is an attack on their servers and then they erase a lot of destroy the data, that could be a big, big, huge problem. All right. So make sure you write all of those bullet points down, and you got to identify the networks on the require. And what's requires an understanding of an important application, and make sure you identify the different vulnerabilities for applications and hardwares. The more information you get, the better you are going to be ready to mitigate against problems that they have. All right, then you need to identify the threats. Your organization, you need, what are the threats, and secure those vulnerable assets. So what you want to do is you probably, after you find out what the threats are, the loopholes that you need to patch, what can you do? So you can use firewalls, you can use AAA servers like the ASAs, the Cisco firewall. You can use IPS systems. You can set up, redesign your network. So you can have, if you are an e-commerce company, that you may have, for example, a demilitarized zone where you put all the servers that are needed to be accessed by the public outside your internal network. You may use advanced malware protection, you know, on the edge of your network. Cisco AMP. This will check for viruses or on any type of malwares. Email content security system that checks all the emails, identify the services, all of that. So you can use a lot of stuff, and we will discuss that, of course, more in details on where they should be set up, how you should design, set up your network, and so on. So the more layers you have, the better. All right. So here is one way to set up the internal network, protecting the internal network from outside. So this is one way of having a layer model where the router one will filter out specific data that goes in. It gives it to the firewall. The firewall member is the security guard, either allow you in or not. And then finally, you'll be passed to the router two. He is the one that's going to route you inside the data. Now, in addition to that, you may have a demilitarized zone, you may have an IPS system, AMP, and so on. So, okay, so there are two analogies that you can use for defense in depth. Defense in depth means layers. You want to have, the more layers you have, in security, the better it is. Because if one layer did not catch an intruder, the other layer will definitely, hopefully, will do that. All right, so an analogy is like a security onion. This has nothing to do, by the way, the suite of onion that they have, the security network security tools that we'll be discussing later on this semester. This is just an analogy of how you should set up your security defense in depth, right? So everybody has to go through layers before they get to the actual internal network. So hardened devices, that's one layer. Hardened devices, please write this down. It's with the security onion layer, right? Write these down, right? Each layer should be done before an intruder is able to get to the assets. So one thing, you can harden devices. Hardening devices meaning making sure that all your devices are updated. You're using a AAA server for authentication, authorization, and accounting. For people that need remote access, they should have a username and a password. Where they're going to be authenticated on a server, and then they are authorized, given permission to do whatever you want them to do, and then keep track of what they did. That's accounting. Then after that, you want to be able to filter the content that's passing into your network, right? You want to also have an IPS system that will look for traffic that is the signatures of traffic that will identify if it's an attack or not. It could be a denial of service attack. Firewalls don't stop that. Firewalls just allows packets be in and out. But if somebody's just sending you bogus packets, it could overwhelm your internal server and bring it down. So IPSs will be able to catch that. Of course, you also want to have a firewall to see who's permitted and who's not, right? So all of these layers should be there. And you should always have, this is at least the minimum you should have to protect your internal assets. So that's what a typical onion, you have to go layer by layer to get to the assets. If you have all of that in, it'll be very difficult for an intruder to break in and get to your assets. Another analogy now is called the security artichoke, where you don't have to go layer by layer. This is a little bit more, so please write these down. With the artichoke analogy, they may just need a password, and they got into the system, they bypass everything, right? Client-side attack, an internal attack. The database, get the information from a database where you can have all the information that you want to break into the network. Web applications, right? Where a lot of these are even buffer overflow. This is really a vulnerability or a weakness in the program itself, the software, or even just the user downloading a virus or a malware. So all of these, the user has to take action. Maybe the user have weak password. The user himself inside the network that has capabilities of breaking into the network. He has some rights and privileges to have access to resources. Or they may bring in a thumb drive that has a virus on it, right? Having access to databases or web applications, downloading stuff off the internet. So all of that information, a lot of it, you have to make sure that your employees, your users are protected, because they don't have to go through layers to get there. They probably got there. But if you can compromise one user or get their password, then you break in. That's what the artichoke is. So please write these down and write the first definition, because now everybody can, it's very difficult to create a lot of layers, especially if you are connected to the cloud, right? All right, so let's talk about security policies, regulations, and standards. Business policies. So business policies are the guidelines that are developed by the organization to govern all its actions. Okay, so the policies will define the correct behavior of business and its employees. So in business policies, we are going to have, please take a picture of this, company's policies. This is will tell the rules and the conduct that is responsible by all the employees and the employers. What is your responsibility as an employer and what is the responsibility of the company to you? What rights do you have? What you can and cannot do, things like that, right? For example, dress code. You can't wear shorts to work. You have to show up at 9 o'clock in the morning and you can't leave before 5. Okay, so attendance is important and your conduct, what you can and cannot say, okay? And privacy and things like that. So this is the company's policy. Then there is the employee. You have to have that, right? And you also have to have employee policies. This is mainly by human resources. How much you're getting paid, what your benefits are, what your work schedule, how many weeks of vacations do you get, all of that. So all of that is within the human resources. And then you have the security policies. This is where you get involved as an IT professional. This will identify for the company the rules and behaviors that the administrators and the employees that they can do on the systems, on their computers when they walk in, what they can and cannot say. So what you can download and cannot download on the company's computers and things like that. So we'll talk more about the security policy in a few minutes. Well, here's what you need to do with a security policy. You have to have one. If you walk into a company that does not have a security policy, you should demand that they create one, because if there is no security policy, then it's, anybody can do whatever they want, and will be no consequences for anything that goes wrong, and you can't keep track of anything. So, your boss can tell you to do something illegal and then he'll blame you for it. But if there's a security policy, even if they did that, they'll know that your supervisor did something wrong and he is going to face the consequences. So, please write the following bullet points for the comprehensive security policy. Here are the benefits. So it will demonstrate the organization's commitment to security, set rules for expected behavior, ensure the consistency of system operation, define legal consequences. What are the consequences if you do not adhere to these standards and recommendations and suggestions in the security policy, and give the security staff the backing of the management. So you won't be able to enforce anything without having a security policy in place. And you have to also make sure that the users know that there's a security policy, and they have to be able to have access to it, read it, and maybe you should set up some sort of awareness, maybe a 2-hour awareness in a video, or get together on maybe every 6 months or a year and go over that security policy with the users, so they know what their responsibilities are. All right, in the security policy, what are you going to write? So please write these down, okay? Because when you create a security policy, you should have identification and authentication policy in there. When you walk in, you got to have your badge, scan it. Maybe when you're accessing a specific computer, you have to put your username and password and all of that. Password policies. A lot of times you have control over that, where you force the user to have a minimum of 10 characters and using the complexity rule to set up their passwords. But there is a password policy that should. And if somebody, you can use, you have password crackers to find out who is not adhering to the policy. As a pen tester, you can find out if somebody is following the policy of setting up passwords that are minimum of 10 characters, for example. Acceptable use policy. This is what is acceptable to the organization, what you can and cannot do on their devices, inside the company, or even sometimes outside. on social networks. Remote access, if you can't access the internal network from outside. And if you do, what kind of software do you need to use, and how long, and when, and so on, and what you can and cannot access. Network maintenance policy. You need to identify the device operating system, the minimum device operating system. Maybe they don't want you to use anything prior to Windows 10, or you cannot use a Mac machine on your when you bring in your own device, for example. And sometimes they have to let you know that there's going to be updates to servers that you need to know. You won't be able to do any work remotely over the weekend. Incident handling. You need to be able to tell them that if there is a problem, security breach, what do you do? Who do you contact? What are the steps that you need to take if you run into a problem? Okay. Now, let's talk about bring your own devices. A lot of companies want to bring your own, we want employees to bring their own devices, such as their mobile devices, to work. And that saves them, of course, a lot of money. They don't have to deal with upgrading your device or anything like that. And you can use your device to do your everyday work. You can bring your own laptop, and that saves them money too. But the problem is, when you bring your own device into your company, and that's going to create a security issue. All right. So bring your own device security policy you should have in place. So please write these down. You need to specify the goals for the bring your own device program, which employees can bring their own devices and they can use them, and which cannot. Which devices are going to be supported? Are you allowed to use your phones or laptops or Macs, or whatever, right? The level of access employees are granted using those personal devices, the right to access and activities permitted. You need to identify the regulations that must be adhered to using the employee devices, and what the safeguards that to put in place if the devices are compromised. What are you going to do if somebody loses their laptop and they have some information that, or you sold your device to someone else, right? Maybe you cannot save anything on your laptop, things like that. All right, so the best practices. This is definitely, you need a screenshot of this for bring your own device. So rule number 1, you have to make sure that your device is password protected. Manually control wireless connectivity. So you want to be able to turn off Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Maybe they require you to connect only to trusted networks. They don't want you to be able to go out at Starbucks and have your Wi-Fi and connect to open networks. We don't want that, because they'll have access to your device. And if there is any company sensitive information on your device, they'll be able to get to it. Keep your device updated, back up all your data. If it's a mobile device, you want to use Find My Device. So that if your device got stolen or lost, you'll be able to wipe it out remotely. Provide antivirus program software. And your company may be able to use a mobile device management software that they have to install on your system, and to be able to give you to check your system to see if it's adheres to have the minimum requirement for security. So a lot of times when you try to connect to a network, what they do is they'll check your device to check all of that. And if it's all good, they'll allow you to connect. Otherwise, you won't be. All right, and there are some regulatory and standard compliance. And so external regulations, maybe outside the company, that you have to be familiar with. You have to be ethical, not only inside, but also to the outside, to your employees and vendors and things like that. So you have to be familiar with the InfoSec, right? all the standards, mostly ethical. And of course, you cannot do anything illegal as well, right? All right, so that's that for this module. So please write down everything I told you and upload them, and I will see you on the next module.